Okay, so for our digital neurodiverse meeting, we're going to be talking and reviewing about the 4 functions of behavior. And we talked about the 4 functions of behavior related to the acronym SEAT, S for sensory, E for escape, A for attention, and T for tangibles. So looking for what does this behavior provide for me? Is it a sensory need? Is it an escape need? Is it an attention need? Is it tangibles wanting preferred items or activities? And we talked about this at the beginning of the year, and I just wanted to go back and review some of those things and look at some of our brain rules that we know we have to keep in mind when working with students. Number 1, that the brain is social. The brain is always searching for meaning through patterns. Patterns involve emotions, so the type of emotions that we connect with our practice and even our patterns that we want, our routines that we want our students to have, will be highly connected to emotions. Things that are positive, students will repeat. Things that are negative, they tend to not revisit. The brain is always looking for a positive reinforcer to help enforce a pattern of behavior that they can keep traveling, and get those happy chemicals going in their brain from things that they are emotionally connected and drawn to. So with that, we have to make sure that we're doing positive things in order to shape behavior. Learning involves focused attention and incubation. We have to give kids breaks. The brain cannot process or store without incubation time. Same with adults. We need incubation time too. We can't just keep go, go, go. We have to have some incubation time for our brain to really process and take in and continue to be productive. Emotion drives attention. Interest and attention go hand in hand. We only pay attention to things that we are highly interested in. So we have to figure out ways to make those emotional hooks for our students. And memory works in 2 ways: archiving facts and skills, that memorization, and making sense of an experience. And we know that experiential memory is the strongest type of memory, which is why we need to do things like acting out and role-playing and all the social skills groups and things that we want to do, because that experience of acting things out is the strongest type of memory that we can access and help kids to make connections with. Learning is developmental. Learning is inhibited by threat or fear, and each brain is uniquely organized. So we're looking at a collaborative structure. We would have played this if we were meeting face-to-face, but it is called Fan and Pick, and I'm using this today with just some playing cards. So we were just going to look at the suits on the cards and talk about these questions. So if you were to fan the cards to your neighbor and they draw a card and they get a spade, they would answer the question that goes with spade. So let's just look at each of these questions. If the brain is social, why are social stories and other social role-playing activities important to incorporate into daily routines? So just think about that question for a second. We've got 2 components there, the social stories and also the daily routines, the role-playing of daily routines. And really just having kids act out what things are supposed to look like. If the brain is social, then why are those 2 things so important? I just want to note that you might have your own answers or thoughts on these things, but in knowing that the brain is social and that we kind of need to process things in a social format, for the brain to really bring in information and understand it better, it's so important that kids have things like social stories to help them see what is appropriate, what's expected, what's unexpected, what are your peers thinking when you're doing these different behaviors. And then the same thing goes for these role-playing activities, acting out these social skills groups and things, because they are processing in a social way what is acceptable, what's unexpected, what is expected. And then the next question is the suit of hearts. If the brain is always searching for meaning through patterns, why is it important to repeat routines with visual cues such as stop signs, break cards, help cards, things like that? We talked about routines and how important routines are. These visual schedules, the visual cues that we can give the kids when the teacher jumps up and starts giving directions. And I want you to think about how many things in the day are just verbal prompts and verbal directions, and where can we add all of those visuals, because that's what we're talking about, that brain looking for meaning through patterns and wanting to see routines, rituals, schedules, what's coming next, when is this done, what's expected of me, when can I take a break. So kind of our job as a team is to go in and step in when we can and, pay attention to where the agenda is. Find out how the teacher's moving through the agenda. How can we indicate where we are at in the day, up on the visual schedule that's posted. Could I present a break card to a student and ask them to see if they want to take a break? The stop signs are supposed to be for really catching their eye and getting their attention. Maybe something's off limits. Maybe they're only going to read to a certain chapter in the book. Using all those visual cues is all about helping the brain search for meaning through patterns. The next question says, if patterns involve emotions, meaning we repeat patterns of behavior according to emotions that we had, how can emojis help teach kids to follow positive patterns of behavior and express their feelings in order to avoid outbursts? The emojis is like all having to do with this idea of the zones of regulation stuff. Just knowing that patterns involve emotions, how can we get kids to understand I'm in red, I'm in blue, I'm in yellow, and understand the pattern of behavior that goes with that? Last time I was in red, this is what happened. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? When I tend to be in blue, this is what helps me get back to green. So helping them kind of use those emojis, those facial expressions, the feelings, the zones of regulation stuff to understand their behavior and get in positive patterns of behavior. It's pretty big, the emotion stuff. And the last question says, if learning involves focused attention and incubation, which was that break time, how will you make your space more brain break friendly and sensory friendly? We're working all over the school to try to have quiet, calming corners. We have 2 areas upstairs that we're working to even enhance more as sensory space, a break space, and then of course our think tank room. And I sent out the procedures to the staff concerning how to take advantage of some of those things, the procedures for that. And part of it is making sure that everyone knows you must enter with an adult. It is meant for getting back to the green zone. The tools are only to be used in that kind of a way. You are to go in and respect yourself, others, and property. And when the timer is done, you need to return to class. If a teacher would like a student to take a break, they will text me on my cell phone or one of the other neurodiverse members and request that a break be taken, or students can go with their therapists if they have a therapist with them. We are working on getting more procedures up for certain activities there, but mainly the idea of this needing incubation time is a big part of the brain and how it will really process and retain information, because you can only have so much focused attention time when you need this other incubation time, or you're going to see, some behavior issues. There are two channels of learning and processing: the auditory, which is what is heard, and the visual, which is what is seen. I think we do a really good job of our auditory. We sing our procedures. We tell our kids in short steps what's expected or what's coming next in those procedures. But what we really need to kind of amp up a little bit is our visual. So what is seen? How are we seeing the visual schedule through the day? How our kids are checking off of a list what they've done so far or what needs to be done. Do they know the directions? Are the directions in written format? Are the directions on the handouts and the assignments highlighted or in some kind of visual, technique or manner given to them so that they can understand more easily? Do they always have to have directions repeated auditorily, or can we write them down somewhere and ask them to read number 1, read number 2? So just thinking of those two learning channels. And then short-term memory. Number 1 is taking in information quickly. This is how short-term memory works. You have to do these two things. You're taking in information quickly and accurately enough to be able to think about it and hold on to it. And number 2, you also then have to be able to respond to what you heard. So this is where our kids have the breakdown in executive functioning. It's hard enough for them to take in information quickly and accurately, let alone be able to respond to it. So what we have to do then is think of, which I'm doing a terrible job of in this digital neurodiverse meeting, but using less words. So if there was a theme at all for today, it would be, amp up the visuals, more visuals, less words. And I tried to give you quite a few visuals in our presentation that we're looking at, but boy, I've really gone wordy with this, so I'm not being a good example to you. But the idea is we're not trying to belittle them by talking to them in few words, but we're trying to help them with short-term memory, because especially our kids that have trouble with this executive functioning, they need less words. So, for example, if a student is having trouble keeping their hands in their own space, rather than to go into a long explanation about why this is not okay and what are you doing, we need to give them visual cues and short verbal cues like hands down, and then process with them, what is expected, what's unexpected. But little short cues and phrases for those expected behaviors and those things that we really want to see them practicing. Okay, and we'll stop after this one. I just wanted to stop with the breakdowns. These breakdowns in the processing, in the executive functioning skills for the kids. Breakdowns in the process can occur in the taking in stage of our directions, or the response stage. So kids that have issues with receptive and expressive language, guess what? Our kids with ADHD have issues with receptive and expressive language. Sometimes both, sometimes one. Our kids on the spectrum have issues with receptive and expressive language. Kids that struggle with executive functioning often have some kind of language component with that, where there is a breakdown in their receptive skills or their expressive skills. We see this a lot in kids refusing to write or not wanting to do writing assignments because they can't think of something to write. They may be having almost like writer's block, they call it, but these kids also may be the kids that really struggle with their expressive language skills. And so this taking in stage and this response stage are breakdowns. And another reason why we have to have visual cues for them. Even when it comes to something you think is simplistic, or that they could come up with a topic on their own, let's say for writing, having a menu, a visual menu, or other choices, some kind of visual highlighted choices or word starters or sentence starters, any of those things can help with these breakdowns of receptive and expressive language.